Okay, today I'm up here at the museum at Badger, where I was a few weeks ago, and I said that I was going to make another video up here about the guy that is the museum, probably the most knowledgeable person around about the museum and the area, but he's also extremely knowledgeable about something that he did a number of years ago. And I thought it might be kind of interesting talking to him about his adventure, I guess it would be, in Alaska, because I don't know of people that were in Alaska that worked on the pipeline, and he was one of them. And this was in, he said, 1977 about, and he went up there to work on the line. So this is Verlyn, and he's a local boy. Man. And he was in school when I was in school, and his brother was also in my class in high school. But anyway, here he is, and I want him to tell a few things about the Alaskan Pipeline adventure. So.
Okay, ask away.
Okay. What did you do?
I was hired as a pipeline technician. They had two classifications, pipeline technician and operator, I think was the other one. Technicians were to be maintenance people. And when it came time to start up the pipeline with the crude oil, bring crude oil back, well, even before, they realized that when it worked out, they hadn't hired enough people. They didn't have enough people to operate. So instead of being a maintenance man, I was an operator. So that was a whole different experience for me, because I had been maintenance before here at Badger, and so I had to learn the system a whole different way than I learned when I was working in maintenance. But I was an operator, learned to operate a pump station.
So how big was a pump station? How big a building, or what was that?
It was several buildings connected with Arctic hallways. So initial design, we did not have to go outside to go from one building to another. I think the exception was from the pump room to the manifold room. That was always an outside walk. But when the pipeline first started up, somebody made a mistake at pump station 8, and they had a failure there. So then they quick started up pump station 9, which wasn't scheduled to start at that time, but was ready. So they started up pump station 9, and somebody made a mistake there and left a 2-inch drain valve open on a 26-inch line. And
so you were just pumping oil out?
They were leaking oil. And nobody caught it until the oil was almost to the control room, which is dangerous because crude oil is highly flammable. So then they went through and they sealed all the doors into the different buildings of the pump station. So our Arctic hallways were a little less useful than original. We had to go outside to get to every building. So they installed some extra doors. And the doors were interesting. If you've ever been into a walk-in freezer, a big, like we used to have a locker plant.
Right.
And those doors were like 6-8 inches thick.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the doors were on these Arctic hallways. You push a lever and the door opened. Outside you pulled the lever and the door opened, and those doors were 6-8 inches thick. Highly insulated.
So you were at one of the pump stations, and how many pump stations were there? And how far apart?
Distance between pump stations varied. On the North Slope, we were about 50 miles apart. Pump 1 and 2 were further apart, and there was no pump station 2, just a manifold was at pump 2. It was designed and set up for construction, but they didn't build pump station 2 prior to startup, and I don't know if they have since.
And how many people worked at each station generally?
I don't know.
Half of them?
We had a rotating, I was part of a rotating crew. We worked a week on, week off. And there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there were 6 of us on our crew, including our crew chief. And we would be flown to the pump station the beginning of our week. At the end of the week, we were flown back to back home. I lived in Anchorage. Some of our crew lived in Fairbanks, so we made a stop in Fairbanks, going both ways, to pick up and drop off the Fairbanks people, and then to Anchorage, where I lived, and some others. And there was an Alaskan Native lady on our crew. She grew up in Barrow, Alaska, the northernmost community in North America. And she was good. What was I going to say? So it was, and we had to have a permanent Alaskan address. It could not be the pipeline. So I had an apartment in Mountain View, which is a suburb of Anchorage.
And how much did you make an hour when you went up? Did you go up, boy, you're going to make a lot of money? Was that the plan? Because
a job was the reason for, I got laid off from here, so I needed a job. And it was suggested that I apply for this job in Alaska. So I did. I called a headhunter in Madison. A headhunter is a name for recruiter.
right.
I called a headhunter in Madison. I was given a number and talked to him, and they said, well, send us a resume, a letter, cover letter, and answer 3 questions, I think it was. The only question I remember, 2 questions. One, why do you want to go to Alaska? And the one that really floored me was, why should we hire you? Well, he's telling me to brag, and I was raised not to brag. So I answered the questions and did the resume, and I think there was some other piece of paper as well that they wanted. And apparently I did everything right, because then they called me to Madison for an interview. And so he interviewed me, and at the time I had a mustache and beard, I think, at least a mustache. And he suggested, he says, you don't have to shave, but I would suggest that you be clean shaven for the interview and make a better impression. That's no problem. I'm not married to it. So I shaved, and then he said, they will pay for your flight to Anchorage, but it would also be to your advantage if you could pay for it up front, and then they will reimburse you. So I did. It took most of what I had, but I paid for my flight up, and they did reimburse me. And I was interviewed by 3 people. The third one, I don't remember really the first 2. The third one I remember because at the interview, when he was through with his question, he asked me if I had any. He says, yeah, only one. He says, what am I interviewing for? Well, he says, I don't know. So what they were really interviewing for, I figured out later, at least I think, they were interviewing personalities, because we're going to be working and living 24/7 for a week on, week off, with a crew of people. And the only entertainment is right there at the pump station. So you have to be a personality who can live under those isolated circumstances with some people that you're working with for 24/7. You're not good. You fly. The company flies you to the pump station. You're there with those 6 or 7 people plus other people that are permanent there or they're on a different schedule. So you have to get along. And if you're the kind of person who has difficulty getting along with other people, you aren't going to work. So I think that's what they were really interviewing for, and as well as some technical knowledge, etc., what experience. But they were looking at personality. That was the most important.
So obviously you passed.
Yeah, I came back, and then I got a letter.
Back home, you mean to Sauk?
Yeah, came back to home. Then I got a letter. I've forgotten when. And I was hired, and they wanted a start date. Well, they had suggested one. I said, well, I had some things to take care of here first, because I and another guy had installed a sound system at the UCC church in Sauk City. And I needed to complete that and complete the instructions. Well, it turned out I completed the instructions in Alaska and mailed them to the church here. But so I actually started then in April, and I had 5 weeks of training, pipeline training, before they sent me to the pump station. Initially, I got there before the training was start, so I was on the job on the payroll for 3 days. Well, before the school started. Well, what are we going to do with him? We can't just have him sitting around here doing nothing while we're paying him. So they sent me to Pump Station 1, which was another experience. And after being 4 years in the Air Force, which I'm glad I was in the Air Force, but I didn't like the military methods. So I got to that first trip to the pipeline and got there at mealtime. So we were going to the mess hall. I got there, and if I hadn't been 3 miles from home, I would have turned around and left. Because that just was the Air Force all over again, military all over again, and I didn't like it. But I stayed, and then went through the training school, and then was assigned to Pump Station 3.
Okay, so then you were up close to beyond the Arctic Circle.
I was 160 miles north of the Arctic Circle, 125 miles south of Pump Station 1, which was very close to Prudhoe Bay.
So if anybody wanted to look that up, they probably could find it on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
And but Verlyn's experience, he went up in the month of what, March? April?
March, April.
And then the days were just going to start getting longer and longer.
Yeah. I have a photograph of Pump Station 3 at midnight on the longest day of the year. Okay. And it was noon. It looked almost like noon. And then I have a photograph. I left in December, close to the shortest day of the year, but before that. So when I left, sunrise was sunset, and sunset was sunset. It was all just one. The sun just cleared the northern horizon. And I think I may have tried to take a picture of that. I don't remember. I came back from Alaska. I had never done some photography, but not a lot. But I went to Alaska with a 35 millimeter camera, and I came back with about 5,000 slides.
Okay.
So sometimes I kind of went wild.
And that certainly is, when you look back or think back, that can be kind of costly compared to the way you take photos nowadays with digital cameras.
Yeah, it cost a little with the film, and then I had to take some time to organize those slides.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. I'm not going to be able to do both things here today. This is just the main. This is only part one because I'm going to come back and do the things that I wanted to do. But Verlyn's experience of going up to Alaska, I find, is quite interesting because I don't know of anybody else that has ever worked on the pipeline, which is 4 foot diameter pipes.
it's a 4-foot diameter pipe, capable of handling, I think it was 2 million barrels a day. When I left, we were pumping 800,000
Okay.
barrels a day.
And tell me what you said about the type of oil that's there compared to Alaska,
The Alaskan
the
crude,
Middle East.
Alaskan crude oil is a paraffin-based crude, which was a concern to designers and engineering when they were going to start the pipeline. The paraffin was expected to drop out. As the oil goes through the pipeline, they expected it was going to cool down because it comes out of the ground hot. It's 9,000 feet down. The wells are 9,000 feet deep, so it's warm when it comes up out of the ground, and goes through some processes to clean up the basic sediment and water out of it, which is the junk that you don't want, and then down through the pipeline. But they found that when the oil finally reached Valdez for the first time, we heard that it came out of the pipe at 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So there wasn't going to be any paraffin dropping out. And there wasn't. They ran a pig through the line on a regular basis, and there was a system set up of valves where it could go through the pump station. It didn't go through the pumps. The pump would have destroyed it. It would have destroyed the pump. So it could bypass the pump and then move on to the next pump station. So there was a series of valves that would handle that. But for the most part, what they got with the pig was junk that had been unintentionally or otherwise in the pipeline from construction. And
So you said the Middle Eastern oil.
Middle Eastern oil is asphalt-based oil, and from what I got from my training and from working up there, Alaskan crude paraffin-based is a plant-sourced crude oil. The Arab oil or Middle East is asphalt-based. That's animal-based crude oil.
That's a little bit too complicated for me and the people I'm connected with. You too, yeah. Okay. Did you, you said you lived with a bunch of people all the time. How did that go for the most part?
Good. We were well fed. That's important. They had for the sake of lack of a better term, mobile homes, which isn't right. They were modular and stacked. Wires were stacked too high.
Okay.
And so we had an apartment. Everybody had an apartment. We shared an apartment with somebody on a different shift.
Oh.
So when we were there, when I was there, it was my apartment.
Yeah.
When the other guy was there, it was his apartment.
Okay.
And I had to leave. When I left, I had to leave a nice apartment
Right.
because somebody else is going to live in there the next week.
Okay.
Because we worked a week on, week off. And so then the dining hall, we were well fed. We always had a choice of several kinds of meat and different vegetables. It was always a buffet.
Yeah.
It wasn't the military. You went through and they plopped stuff in a
Right.
tray. This, you picked out what you wanted to eat.
Okay.
And every Sunday we had prime rib. The Sunday that I was there, and I don't know if they had it every Sunday, but the Sunday that the crew I was on was there, which was I've forgotten, our last day, I think, was the next day or something like that. Every Sunday for supper, we had a choice of prime rib and something else. You didn't have to take the prime rib, but
Did you ever have caribou?
not that I know of. Yeah, not that I know of.
Okay. So you ate well?
We ate well. Yeah, I gained weight. Every week that I was at the pipeline, I gained weight.
So basically what you did at the station, what were you doing?
I was operating the pipeline.
What?
We had, let's stop and think. We had 4 pumps at our pump station. Each pump, I think, I'm not sure of the exact numbers anymore. But when I left, I think we were running one pump with another pump on standby, which means it had oil in it, was ready to go. And the engine might be running just on idle, I'm not sure.
Do you remember how big those pumps were?
The pumps were surprising, well, they were big. They took over 3,000, the driver was over 3,000 horsepower. At 3,000, no, I've got, the driver was 13,000 horsepower at 3,000 RPM. And the pump ran at, I think, less than that. I could be wrong. That was at 3,000. Our driver, prime driver, was a turbojet engine, aircraft engine.
Okay.
With 3 additional compressor stages added to the front end to make up for the lack of the ram air coming in from a moving aircraft. And that was the exhaust from that went into a hot gas turbine. There was no mechanical connection between the engine and the pump, other than the ductwork for that hot exhaust gas that ran a hot gas turbine. And the turbine, again, I'm forgetting numbers, but the gas lost half its temperature across the turbine, and that was the energy that was running the pump, and that was went through a gearbox, and coming off the gearbox was 3,000 RPM was 1,300 horsepower.
Well, this sounds kind of complex and complicated to me, but did you have to replace any of the pumps?
No, not while I was there.
Okay.
We did have a pump. We had to make every hour, we had to make a tour through the pump station. Again, because of the incident in Pump Station 9 when we started up. So, and a round would take about 45 minutes, half an hour to 45 minutes. And so we had to look at everything that was running. So one day I made my round, and I noticed that at one of the lube oil lines, because it was forced oil through all the bearings and everything, one of the lube oil lines where it entered the housing of the pump had a little oil around, a little weep. Not serious at that point, but watch it, because it's going to get worse. I barely got back to the control room, and I got a phone call. Verlyn, you've got a serious leak at pump station 1, at pump 1, which was the pump we were running. And I said, well, I was just there, and it's just a weep. He says, now it's a pencil-sized stream. So I went out there, and yeah, we got a leak. So I called the control room, and Margaret, an Alaskan lady, was, she and I were the operating team on that shift. And I told Margaret, we have to shut down pump number 1 and bring up number 2 and notify downstream that they're going to get a bump. This is an emergency shutdown and startup. And so she did it, and then we filed a report for that pump, and they came out and found that there was a vibration, and this was the only pump of that brand in our pump station. The other three were a different make, and they operated, the lube oil system was a little bit different. They found that there was a vibration in the lube oil piping, and that had cracked this pipe at the housing of the pump and broke it. So they did some testing, and they found the vibration, and all they had to do was put a weight in a specific point on one of the longer lube oil lines, and that ended the vibration. It turned that one longer pipe into two shorter ones. It's just like when you look at the high lines, you see these things hanging. Those are weights so that that high line doesn't gallop.
Well, so you worked 24 hours, I mean,
We worked 12 on, 12 off at
Okay.
the pump station, and we were at the pump station 7 days.
so 7 times 12 is 84.
We got paid anything over 40 hours was overtime, and anything over 8 hours, was overtime, and anything over 40 was overtime. So basically, for my week on, I got 2 weeks pay,
2 weeks pay, which is equal to,
which that was the overtime. The 40 hours plus overtime amounted to 2 weeks pay
at $10 an hour.
at 10.45 an hour.
So,
So yeah, I did all right. However, I didn't save. I don't know how to save. I came back, when I quit, I came back with enough money to get me back.
that's
And that
better,
was about
that's
it.
better than what I did on one of my trips. I came back with nothing. Or borrowed. Anyway, I don't know how much of this I can put on my video here today, but I'm going to put this up. And like I said before, Verlyn is a good guy to, if you want to talk to him about Badger ordinance, which I intended to do, or his adventures in Alaska, he'd be glad to do it, I think.
Yeah.
And he has probably a lot more stories to tell, questions that, why did you quit? Was it boring?
No, I had been in contact with people here,
Okay.
and the new acid plant was being built. So I had a job with the Stearns and Rogers company, who was completing construction of the new acid plant when I left Alaska.
Okay.
And I don't remember exactly. Well, they were going to unionize, which didn't excite me too much. Plus, there were some other things that I had just decided, well, this job is here. I'm coming home.
And you haven't been back.
No. Well, that costs money, takes time.
Do you keep in touch with anybody or
No.
people from?
No, I'm not very good at keeping in touch with people I work with.
Me neither. I wouldn't. It would be hard to do now. Nowadays it would be a little bit different with the internet and Facebook, but almost 50 years ago is what this experience was.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the length of time it took to do that pipeline or build
I
it.
don't remember how. I think construction was something like 5 years, or
Okay.
they got started 5 years late,
Okay.
behind schedule, because of issues with the environmental.
Okay. And I would expect that there's probably ongoing people working, coming and going all the time because you can't.
Although the pumps operate differently now than they did when I was there. They replaced the jet engine driver system with electric motors, 13,000 horsepower electric motors. And there is no electric power up there other than on-site generators. So there is a generator for each one of the motors. Megawatt generators for each of the motors.
And I don't know, I don't think I would want to work up there with what was it? The isolation that exists. You'd probably get used to
Well,
it.
there were interesting places. You go for hikes. Took, and we were close to a Sag River. Oh, that's what we referred to it. That's the short name. The true name is an Alaskan Native name, and I can't pronounce. But the river was close to the pump station, so I went for hikes down there once in a while. Interesting thing, temperature during the day could get up to, I think, one day they said that the thermometer at the guard's shack hit 80 degrees at noon or during the day. And when I went for a hike or walk down to the river, I wore a jacket because when the sun got down, it was going to get cold, from 80 to 50
Okay.
in a few hours. So you wore a jacket.
Were you there during any of the season when it was extremely cold?
I got there and it was below zero. And I left December 8th, and it was my last day on the job. It was 20 below zero, I think. And I typically wore a shirt and a sweatshirt in the pump station. I didn't have to go far to go from the barracks to the station. And then I had a walk, my tour through the station. I had to walk from the pump room to the manifold room, and that was about 100 feet. And I was glad it wasn't any further. But the difference, 20 below zero here and just a sweatshirt or couple of shirts, that's colder in blazes. Up there, because here the humidity is high. The North Slope of Alaska is classified a desert. It's the greenest desert you'll ever see, but it's a desert. So it's very dry, so you can dress for that cold weather very easily. So I could walk that 100 feet or whatever it was with the clothes I was wearing in the pump station. But like I said, I was glad it wasn't any further than that. I would have had to put on a jacket.
Oh, back to your transport from your station to your place in Anchorage. Was that by helicopter?
No, that was a regular airplane. Most of the time we flew in a German-made Metro 2 was the name of the aircraft. Interesting thing about that airplane, one day one of my fellow crew members said he had talked to the pilot, or talked to somebody, and they said that airplane could carry a full load of fuel and a pilot and a picture of the co-pilot, no passengers. So I asked the pilot one day about that. He says, yeah, that's true. He says, I don't know why they designed it that way, but we can't haul a full load of fuel. And there were two crews flying that airplane, at least that we had. One pilot, if he didn't bounce the airplane 3 times when he landed, something was wrong. The other one, you didn't know the difference when you were on the ground or flying. He just greased it in every time. You really hardly felt it hit the ground. But they were good pilots. And I have a photograph. One day I noticed that on the way up to the pump station, we got in a certain area, and they had autopilot on the plane, and they set that up. And here was the pilot. We could look through into the cockpit. And here was the pilot and the co-pilot, each of them with a newspaper in front of them, reading the newspaper. And once in a while they'd look and check the autopilot and everything's fine. Go back to reading their newspaper.
And how many passengers were there?
I don't know. We hauled 2 crews. Pump Station 3 and Pump Station 4 flew together.
Okay.
So that was at least 14 of us. Something like that.
Okay. Well, when I'm done with this now, I'm going to go back home and look at the map of Alaska and try to see Pump Station 1, 2, and 3 and see how far they are from Anchorage and how many minutes, I suppose, or hours.
Well, it took us I don't know.
Anyway,
Something like that. I don't know.
any nasty weather that you remember?
We had some whiteouts when they closed the Hall Road. Because a whiteout there is a real whiteout. You can't see the hood in front of your car. And they had markers along. The snow was blowing. You aim to drive between those delineators. Well, when you get to a turnout or something, there's no delineator. And I heard a guy talking on YouTube about his experience there as a truck driver on the pipeline. And he got to one of these turnouts, well, the delineator, and he turned, and all of a sudden he went off the road. Well, the road in some places is maybe 20 feet above the tundra. So the road all the way is built up. You're not driving on the tundra. They had to build the road up so that it would keep the tundra frozen. And under the pump station, there was a huge refrigeration system to keep the tundra under the pump station frozen. Otherwise, you have unstable ground, and you have an environmental issue that you really don't want. So you take steps to keep the ground permafrost frozen under your buildings and under the Hall Road.
Okay. GoPro, stop recording.